In 1992, Rainer Henn lifted the frozen corpse with his bare hands. The 5,300-year-old body was rigid, perfectly preserved in glacial ice. Within 12 months, Henn's car collided head-on with a truck on a mountain road in the Austrian Alps. He died instantly. Kurt Fritz, the mountaineer who led investigators to the body, died next. An avalanche struck his climbing group in terrain he'd navigated for decades. He was the only casualty. Then came the journalist who filmed the excavation. Brain tumor, age 47. The Austrian forensic pathologist who examined the remains. Heart failure during what should have been routine surgery. The discoverer himself, Helmut Simon, fell 300 feet down an alpine cliff in 2004. His body was found 8 days later, frozen in the same mountains where he'd found the ancient corpse, by 2005. 7 people connected to the discovery were dead. Archaeologists dismissed it as coincidence. Statistical analysis showed no significance. The South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology issued statements. No curse existed. Hundreds had been involved in the excavation and study. Only 7 had died. The numbers meant nothing. But the deaths continued in patterns that were violent, sudden, and clustered around those who had direct physical contact. And the frozen man was only one. Across museums, institutional archives, and controlled burial sites, objects wait. Documented, cataloged, maintained under glass and climate control. Unexplained, what follows is not speculation. These are objects held in institutional collections. Their histories are recorded in museum ledgers and academic journals. Their effects are documented in coroner reports and medical records. The deaths are real. The contradictions remain. 10 artifacts. No definitive answers. Only patterns that repeat across centuries, continents, and collections that refuse to acknowledge what their own protocols suggest they believe. Ötzi the Iceman. The body emerged from the Ötztal Alps on September 19, 1991. 2 German hikers, Helmut and Erika Simon, found what they believed was a recent climbing fatality. The corpse lay face down in a rocky gully at 10,530 feet, partially frozen in glacial ice. The skin had a leathery, brown appearance. The Simons contacted Austrian authorities. Local officials assumed it was a mountaineer who had died within the last few decades. Bodies emerged from glaciers with some regularity in the Alps. The first assessment changed rapidly. When forensic pathologist Rainer Henn arrived on September 23, he immediately recognized something older. The body's position, the primitive axe found nearby, the strange grass cloak. These suggested antiquity. Henn coordinated the extraction. He and his team used jackhammers and ice picks to free the corpse from the ice. Henn himself handled the body directly, lifting it from its 5,300-year-old tomb without protective equipment. The remains were transferred to the Institute of Forensic Medicine in Innsbruck. Carbon dating revealed the truth. The body was approximately 5,300 years old, from the Copper Age. It was the oldest naturally preserved human mummy ever discovered in Europe. The scientific community designated him Ötzi, named after the Ötztal Alps. He became immediately valuable, a window into Neolithic life, preserved with clothing, tools, and even his last meal. Identifiable in his stomach, Rainer Henn died on August 4, 1992. He was en route to a conference where he planned to lecture about Ötzi. His car crossed into the opposite lane on a mountain road near Telfs, Austria. The head-on collision killed him instantly. He was 64. The official cause was listed as traffic accident. No mechanical failure was found. No explanation for the lane departure was recorded. Kurt Fritz died in 1993. Fritz was the experienced mountain guide who had led archaeologists and officials to the discovery site multiple times during the initial excavation phase. In an avalanche near the same region, Fritz's group was struck. He was the only member killed. He had guided in those mountains for over 30 years. Avalanche reports from that day noted that conditions were not extreme. The slide was described as unexpected. The same year, Rainer Holzel died. Holzel was a journalist and filmmaker who had documented the excavation extensively. He had been present during the body's removal and had filmed Henn's team at work. At age 47, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. He died within months of diagnosis. Medical records listed glioblastoma. No environmental or genetic factors were identified as contributing causes. Helmut Simon, the man who discovered the body, died on October 18, 2004. He had returned to the Alps for a hiking trip. He fell 300 feet down a cliff during what was described as good weather. His body was not found immediately. Search teams located him 8 days later. He had frozen to death in the same mountain range where he'd found Ötzi 13 years earlier. He was 67 years old. Dieter Warnecke led the rescue team that recovered Simon's body. On October 25, 2004, 1 hour after returning from Simon's funeral, Warnecke died of a heart attack. He was 45 years old. He had no prior history of cardiac issues. The medical examiner noted the death as sudden cardiac arrest. No autopsy findings. Explain the timing. Konrad Spindler died on April 17, 2005. Spindler was the head of the research team at Innsbruck University that had conducted the initial scientific analysis of Ötzi. He had been one of the first archaeologists to examine the body and had supervised much of the early research. Years earlier, when asked about the so-called curse in a media interview, Spindler had joked, "I suppose I'll be next." He died of complications from multiple sclerosis at age 66. He had been diagnosed years before the discovery, but colleagues noted a rapid deterioration following. His work on the mummy, Tom Lloyd, died in October 2005. Lloyd was an Australian molecular archaeologist who had conducted DNA analysis on tissue samples from Ötzi. He had handled blood samples and organic material from the body. He was found dead in his Brisbane home at age 63. The cause of death was listed as unspecified. Lloyd had been working on a book about Ötzi at the time of his death. The manuscript was never completed. 7 deaths over 13 years. The South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology, where Ötzi now resides in a climate-controlled chamber, released a statement in 2005. The museum noted that hundreds of people had been involved in the discovery, excavation, research, and ongoing study of the remains. 7 deaths among hundreds, they argued, represented no statistical anomaly. Academic papers analyzing the curse phenomenon concluded that the pattern was confirmation bias. People remembered the deaths and forgot the survivors. Yet the museum maintains strict protocols. Ötzi is kept in a specialized refrigeration unit at -6 degrees Celsius with 98% humidity. Researchers who wish to study the body must submit detailed proposals. Physical access is limited and supervised. Approximately 300,000 people visit the museum annually to view Ötzi through a small window in the climate chamber. None have reported adverse effects. The deaths cluster exclusively around those who had direct physical contact with the body during the initial discovery and research phases. No fungal contamination has been found in the ice where Ötzi was preserved. No bacterial agents have been identified that would explain sudden deaths years after exposure. The museum displays him as a scientific marvel, a window into the Copper Age. The refrigeration chamber maintains his preservation. The protocols maintain distance. What remains unexplained is why those who touched him died in patterns that were violent and sudden, and why those who have only looked at him through glass have not. King Tutankhamun's tomb on November 4, 1922. British archaeologist Howard Carter uncovered steps leading down into the Valley of the Kings. By November 26, he had broken through the sealed doorway. His patron, Lord Carnarvon, stood beside him as Carter held a candle through the opening. When asked what he could see, Carter replied, "Wonderful things." The tomb of Tutankhamun had remained sealed for over 3,000 years. Within 6 months, Carnarvon would be dead. The excavation proceeded through early 1923. The tomb's contents were extraordinary: golden artifacts, furniture, chariots, and the mummy of the boy king himself, encased in multiple nested coffins. International media covered the discovery extensively. Public fascination was immediate. 2 weeks before Carnarvon's death, novelist Marie Corelli published a letter in the New York World, claiming she owned an Arabic text warning that anyone who entered a sealed tomb would suffer dire punishment. The letter was widely circulated. Lord Carnarvon died on April 5, 1923. In Cairo, he had been bitten by a mosquito. He cut the bite while shaving. The wound became infected. Blood poisoning developed rapidly. He died at age 57, 5 months after the tomb was opened. Contemporary accounts reported that at the moment of his death, All lights in Cairo went out simultaneously. The power outage was later attributed to a generator failure, though the exact timing was never confirmed. Carnarvon's dog in England reportedly howled and died at the same hour. Though this account comes from second-hand sources, George J. Gould, an American financier, visited the tomb in early 1923 at Carnarvon's invitation. He contracted a fever shortly after entering. He died of pneumonia in the French Riviera weeks later. He was 58. Medical records listed the fever as having been contracted in Egypt, but no specific pathogen was identified. Arthur Mace, Carter's assistant and excavation partner, had been present for the opening. Mace had physically entered the burial chamber and handled artifacts. By 1924, he began experiencing severe fatigue and respiratory problems. Diagnosed with pleurisy and pneumonia, he never recovered. He died in 1928 at age 54. His death certificate listed respiratory failure. Colleagues noted he had been in robust health before the excavation. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, a radiologist, X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy in 1923. He returned to England and within months was diagnosed with a mysterious illness. He died in 1924. The cause was listed as complications from what was described as a sudden onset condition that physicians could not definitively diagnose. He was 60. Richard Bethel served as Carter's personal secretary during the excavation. He had cataloged artifacts and maintained excavation records. On November 15, 1929, Bethel was found dead in his bed at the Bath Club in Mayfair, London. He had been smothered. The death was ruled as occurring in his sleep, though the exact mechanism was never clarified. He was 46. Within months, his father, Lord Westbury, died by suicide, throwing himself from his 7th-floor apartment. A note was never found. Lord Westbury had never visited Egypt. Hugh Evelyn White, an archaeologist who had worked in the Valley of the Kings, hanged himself in 1924. He left a suicide note written in his own blood. "I have succumbed to a curse which forces me to disappear." He had not been part of Carter's team, but had conducted independent excavations in the same area by 1929. The popular press had cataloged multiple deaths. Numbers varied. Some accounts claimed as many as 26 people connected to the tomb had died within 7 years. Statistical analysis conducted decades later revealed different numbers. Of the 58 people present at the tomb's opening, only 8 had died within 12 years. This represented normal mortality rates for the period and age demographics involved. Howard Carter himself lived until 1939. He died of lymphoma at age 64, 17 years after opening the tomb. He had spent those years cataloging and studying the tomb's contents. He experienced no unusual illnesses during that time. Carter publicly dismissed the curse as media fabrication. He stated repeatedly that there was no inscription in the tomb threatening death to intruders. No such curse text has ever been found in Tutankhamun's burial chamber or any associated artifacts. Lady Evelyn Herbert, Carnarvon's daughter, had been one of the first to enter the tomb. She lived until 1980, dying at age 79 of natural causes. She never reported any curse-related incidents. In the 1990s, scientists proposed a biological explanation. Testing of other sealed Egyptian tombs revealed the presence of Aspergillus flavus, a fungus that can damage the lungs and immune system when spores are inhaled. The fungus thrives in enclosed, dark environments with organic material present. Lord Carnarvon, George Gould, and Arthur Mace all exhibited symptoms consistent with fungal lung infections, fever, respiratory failure, and gradual deterioration. The theory was plausible. But no samples from Tutankhamun's tomb were ever preserved for testing. The tomb had been fully ventilated and exposed to air for months before any deaths occurred. And the fungal theory did not account for deaths like Bethel's smothering or Douglas Reed's unspecified sudden illness. Aspergillus exposure causes gradual respiratory damage, not overnight mortality. The Smithsonian Institution and the British Museum, both of which house Egyptian artifacts, maintain environmental controls in their storage and display areas. Temperature and humidity are regulated. Artifact handling requires gloves and, in some cases, masks. These protocols are described as preservation measures. They are not described as protective measures for staff. Donald B. Redford, an Egyptologist, characterized the curse narrative as unadulterated claptrap. Academic consensus aligns with this assessment. No physical evidence of a curse exists. The statistical clustering of deaths falls within expected ranges. Media sensationalism and public fascination created a narrative from coincidence. What is documented? Fungal spores can exist in sealed tombs. What is not documented? Why only certain individuals who entered the tomb developed fatal conditions while others, including Carter, did not. The official position acknowledges biological risk. It does not explain selectivity. Museums present the science. They maintain the protocols. And they do not display photographs of the dead together. The Screaming Mummy. Unknown man, in June 1886. Gaston Maspero, head of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, unwrapped a mummy that had been discovered 5 years earlier. The body had been found in the Deir el-Bahri cache, designated DB 320, a hiding place where priests had concealed royal mummies during the 21st dynasty to protect them from tomb robbers. Most mummies in the cache were clearly labeled and properly prepared. This one was not. The coffin was plain, with no identifying marks or inscriptions. The body inside was wrapped in sheepskin, a material considered ritually unclean in ancient Egyptian culture. When Maspero removed the wrappings, the face beneath was frozen in what appeared to be a scream. The mouth was wide open. The expression suggested agony or terror. The hands and feet were bound. Maspero noted immediate anomalies. Traditional Egyptian mummification involved removal of internal organs through an incision in the abdomen. This body retained all its organs. No incision had been made. The brain had not been extracted through the nasal cavity, as was standard practice. Yet expensive embalming materials had been used. Analysis later revealed frankincense and juniper resin, both imported and costly. The body had been carefully treated with preservatives. But the fundamental procedures of mummification had been omitted. Maspero, along with colleagues Daniel Fouquet and Georges Mathy, proposed that the man had died by poisoning or had been buried alive. The expression and the binding suggested a death that occurred in extreme distress. The sheepskin wrapping indicated intentional defilement. Someone had wanted this person preserved but degraded, remembered but not honored. In 1912, anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith examined the mummy and disagreed. Smith argued that the expression could be explained by post-mortem muscle relaxation and jaw displacement. He stated, "A corpse that was dead of any complaint might fall into just such an attitude." The scream, he suggested, was an artifact of decomposition, not evidence of suffering. The identity remained unknown for over a century. The mummy was stored in the Cairo Museum, occasionally displayed, but never prominently. It was catalogued as unknown man. In 2012, DNA analysis provided an answer. The body belonged to Prince Penaware, son of Ramesses III. The Judicial Papyrus of Turin, a document from the reign of Ramesses III, records a conspiracy to assassinate the pharaoh. Penaware was implicated. The papyrus describes how conspirators, including members of the royal household, attempted to kill Ramesses III by slashing his throat. The plot failed, though Ramesses died from his wounds. The conspirators were tried. Most were executed by fire. Penaware, because of his royal blood, was granted the privilege of suicide rather than execution. The DNA confirmation aligned with the papyrus. Penaware had died, most likely by strangulation or hanging, around 1155 BCE. The lack of a name on the coffin ensured he would have no identity in the afterlife, a severe punishment in Egyptian belief. The sheepskin wrapping defiled him eternally. The retention of organs meant his mummification was incomplete, further damaging his prospects for resurrection. But contradictions remained. If the goal was to erase Penaware from existence, why preserve the body at all? Cremation or simple burial would have sufficed. Instead, someone had invested in expensive embalming materials, frankincense from Arabia, juniper from the Levant. The treatment was deliberate and costly. Egyptologist Bob Breyer noted in a 2018 interview, "You have two forces acting on this mummy. One force trying to get rid of him, to damn him for eternity, and another force trying to preserve him." The scream itself remains medically debated. Cadaveric spasm, a rare form of instantaneous rigor mortis, can occur during moments of extreme physical or psychological trauma. It locks muscles at the moment of death. If Pentawere died by strangulation while conscious and struggling, cadaveric spasm could have fixed his jaw in an open position. But cadaveric spasm requires very specific conditions, sudden violent death combined with high adrenaline. It does not occur in suicides by poison or in deaths from illness. Alternative explanations suggest the jaw simply fell open after death as tissues decayed, and the embalming process preserved that position. This is common in mummies where the jaw was not secured during wrapping. But other mummies with open mouths do not convey the same visual impression. The musculature around Pentaware's face, visible in CT scans, shows tension patterns inconsistent with relaxed post-mortem displacement, the IN 2018. The mummy was temporarily displayed at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo as part of a special exhibition. Media attention focused on the scream. Photographs circulated widely. The expression became the subject of renewed public fascination. Museum officials emphasized the historical and archaeological significance. They did not address the contradiction between punishment and preservation. The mummy currently resides in museum storage. It is not on permanent display, unlike Tutankhamun or other royal mummies. Handling protocols require gloves and limited exposure time, standard for all ancient organic materials. The protocols are described as conservation measures. What remains unanswered is not whether Pentawere was punished. The historical record confirms that. What remains unanswered is why his punishment included preservation. If the goal was damnation, the body should have been destroyed. If the goal was mercy, the sheepskin should not have been used. The scream could be muscle displacement. The binding could be post-mortem. But the contradictions between care and condemnation defy the institutional explanations that present the mummy as simply a well-documented case of ancient Egyptian judicial punishment. Someone wanted him to last, and someone wanted him to suffer. Both intentions are preserved in the same body. The Antikythera mechanism in the spring of 1901. Greek sponge divers working off the coast of Antikythera, a small island between Crete and mainland Greece, discovered a shipwreck. The wreck lay at a depth of approximately 45 meters. Divers recovered bronze and marble statues, pottery, glassware, and jewelry. Among these artifacts was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, approximately the size of a shoebox. It appeared unremarkable. The divers brought it to the surface along with other materials. The wreck was dated to approximately 70 to 60 BC based on pottery styles and coin evidence. The bronze object was initially ignored. Archaeologists focused on the statues and intact pottery. Months later, the bronze mass split open, revealing a complex system of gears and inscriptions. The initial assessment dismissed it as a later contamination, possibly a medieval astrolabe or clockwork that had fallen onto the ancient wreck site. Bronze gears of that complexity were not supposed to exist in the 1st century BC in the 1950s. Derek J. de Sala Price, a British physicist and historian of science, conducted the first detailed analysis using X-ray imaging. The images revealed at least 30 bronze gears arranged in a sophisticated mechanism. Price published his findings in 1974. The device was an astronomical calculator. It predicted the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. It calculated eclipses. It tracked the metonic cycle, a 19-year calendar system used to align lunar and solar years. It included differential gearing, a technique not seen again in human engineering until the 16th century. The mechanism measured approximately 34 centimeters tall, 18 centimeters wide, and 9 centimeters deep when intact. The front face displayed a circular dial with zodiac signs and an Egyptian calendar. The back face contained 2 large spiral dials, one predicting solar eclipses, the other tracking the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. Users turned a crank on the side to input a date. The gears rotated, and pointers indicated planetary positions. Reconstruction efforts in the 2000s confirmed the device's function. Mathematician Tony Freeth led a research team using advanced imaging technology, including computed tomography. The team built a working replica. It functioned as designed. Freeth stated in a 2006 interview, "If it hadn't been discovered, no one would believe it could exist. It's too sophisticated for what we think they were capable of." The technical specifications are precise. The gear teeth were cut, with accuracy comparable to 18th century clockwork. The gear ratios corresponded to known astronomical cycles, the 19-year Metonic cycle, the 223-month Saros cycle for eclipse prediction, the 54-year Exeligmos cycle for eclipse refinement. The mechanism incorporated knowledge of lunar orbital irregularities, specifically the moon's elliptical orbit and its variable speed. This level of astronomical understanding was not documented in any surviving Greek texts from the period, and no predecessor devices have been found. No simpler versions exist in the archaeological record. The mechanism appears fully formed, with no developmental arc. Greek technology of the Hellenistic period included water clocks and simple geared mills, but nothing approaching this computational complexity. The Romans, who conquered Greece and inherited its knowledge, left no records of such devices. No similar mechanism appears in any culture until the medieval Islamic world developed astrolabes, which were far less mechanically complex. The shipwreck contained luxury items, wine amphorae, bronze furniture, glass vessels. The mechanism was likely being transported as valuable cargo, but its origin remains unknown. The inscriptions on the bronze plates are in Greek, and the calendar systems are Greek, suggesting manufacture in the Hellenistic world. But where, specifically, and by whom, is unrecorded. The device required knowledge of advanced astronomy, precision metalworking, and mathematical gear ratio calculation. No individual or workshop from the period is known to have possessed all three. That the mechanism is currently housed in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. It is displayed in fragments behind protective glass. The museum describes it as an ancient computer, an astronomical calculator from the 2nd or 1st century BCE. The description is accurate. What the museum does not address is the absence of context. Where did the knowledge come from? Why did it not disseminate? If Greeks in 100 BCE could build this, why did comparable technology not reappear for 1500 years? Mathematician Michael Wright, who built multiple reconstructions, noted, "We have to either completely rethink what the Greeks were capable of, or accept that there was a tradition of mechanical computation that left no trace except this one object." The archaeological record shows neither evidence of a broader tradition nor evidence of related devices. The mechanism stands alone. Technology does not typically appear fully realized. It develops through iterations, simpler versions, failed experiments, incremental improvements. The Antikythera mechanism shows no iteration. It is complete, functional, and unprecedented. Its gears are precisely cut. Its calculations are accurate. And then it vanishes from history. The museum displays it. The researchers have replicated it. But no one has explained how knowledge of that sophistication arrived, demonstrated itself in bronze and wood, and then disappeared without descendants or documentation for over a millennium. The Baghdad Battery in 1936. German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig was cataloging artifacts at the National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad. Among the items was a clay pot, approximately 13 centimeters tall, discovered during railroad construction near Kujut Rabu, southeast of Baghdad. The pot dated to the Parthian period, approximately 150 BCE to 250 CE. Inside the pot was a copper cylinder. Inside the cylinder was an iron rod. The top of the pot had been sealed with bitumen, a natural asphalt. Koenig examined the construction. The copper cylinder showed signs of corrosion, specifically the blue-green patina consistent with acid exposure. The iron rod was centered within the copper cylinder, but did not touch it. The configuration was functionally identical to a galvanic cell, a device that generates electrical current through the chemical reaction between two dissimilar metals in an electrolyte solution. Alessandro Volta designed the first recognized galvanic cell in 1800. The Baghdad pot predated Volta by approximately 1800 years. Koenig published his observations in 1938. He proposed the pot had been used for electroplating, depositing a thin layer of gold onto silver objects through electrical current. Electroplating requires a consistent low-voltage power source. The pot's design could theoretically provide that, but no electroplated objects from the Parthian period have ever been identified. All gold-on-silver artifacts from that era show evidence of fire gilding, a process using mercury and heat, not electricity. After World War II, Engineers at General Electric tested a reconstruction. They filled a replica pot with vinegar as the electrolyte. The device generated approximately 0.5 volts. In 2005, the television program Mythbusters constructed 10 replicas and connected them in series. The array produced 4 volts, enough to cause a noticeable shock. A 2025 reconstruction using grape juice as the electrolyte generated 1.4 volts with proper assembly. The electrical capacity is undeniable. The pot functions as a battery. The question is intent. Archaeologists have identified similar clay vessels at Seleucia, another Parthian site. Those vessels contain papyrus scrolls. The copper and iron configuration may have served a non-electrical purpose, perhaps as a sealed scroll container where the metals prevented decay. The bitumen seal would protect organic materials from moisture. Alternative theories have been proposed. Ancient texts from Mesopotamia and Egypt describe the use of electric fish, specifically electric catfish and torpedo rays, for medical treatment. The fish deliver shocks that can numb pain. If Parthians understood that electrical shock had therapeutic effects, they may have attempted to replicate it artificially. But no textual evidence from the Parthian period mentions electricity, electrical devices, or shock therapy using anything other than live fish. The galvanic cell explanation faces a fundamental problem: dissemination. If the Parthians discovered electricity and developed functional batteries, that knowledge should have spread. The Parthian Empire was a major power, controlling trade routes between Rome and China. Technological innovations, steel production, irrigation systems, architectural techniques moved along those routes. But no similar devices appear in Roman territories, Chinese archaeological sites, or later Persian contexts. The knowledge, if it existed, remained isolated. In 2003, during the invasion of Iraq, the National Museum in Baghdad was looted. The original Baghdad battery disappeared. It has not been recovered. What remains are reconstructions, photographs, and Koenig's original documentation. Museums that display replicas describe the artifact as a possible battery or alleged galvanic cell. The Smithsonian's description notes the device could have generated electricity, but emphasizes alternative explanations. Residue analysis of the copper cylinder indicated the presence of an acidic substance, consistent with vinegar or wine, both of which would function as electrolytes. But the analysis was conducted decades after excavation, and contamination from museum storage cannot be ruled out. The original context of the pot's discovery was not well documented. Railroad workers found it, not trained archaeologists. The precise location within the site and any associated artifacts were not recorded. The current academic consensus treats the Baghdad battery as a curious coincidence. The configuration resembles a galvanic cell, but functional resemblance does not prove intentional design. Many objects throughout history have accidentally mimicked later inventions. A clay pot designed to store scrolls, using copper and iron for structural reasons, might coincidentally possess electrical properties without the creators knowing or intending it. But the precision of the design raises questions. The iron rod is centered within the copper cylinder. If the placement were random, the rod would likely touch the cylinder walls. The centering suggests deliberate engineering. The bitumen seal prevents the electrolyte from evaporating, which would be necessary for sustained electrical generation, but unnecessary for a simple storage vessel. The combination of design elements, dissimilar metals, acidic residue, sealed construction, centered electrode, aligns too closely with functional battery design to dismiss as entirely accidental. The artifact that could resolve the debate is gone. The original pot, cylinder, and rod were stolen in 2003 and have not resurfaced. What remains are replicas that work and experts who disagree. Museums present the electrical capacity as verified. They present the intent as uncertain. The protocols remain: display behind glass, handle with gloves, maintain climate control. These are described as standard conservation practices for ancient artifacts. They are not described as precautions against functional electrical devices from civilizations that were not supposed to understand electricity. The Screaming Woman, City 8. Between 1935 and 1936, a Metropolitan Museum of Art expedition excavated Theban tomb 71 near Luxor. The tomb belonged to Senmut. the architect of Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. Beneath Senmet's family tomb, excavators discovered a burial containing a wooden coffin. Inside was the mummy of a woman. Her mouth was open, frozen in what appeared to be a scream. The coffin provided no name. The wrappings contained no identifying amulets or inscriptions. The mummy was catalogued as CIT-8 and transported to the Cairo Egyptian Museum. For decades, it remained in storage, minimally studied. In 2024, Egyptian researchers conducted a comprehensive CT scan analysis led by radiologist Sahar Salim. The scans revealed the woman died at approximately age 48. This determination came from analysis of the pubic symphysis, the cartilaginous joint connecting the left and right pubic bones. The joint's surface degenerates predictably with age, allowing researchers to estimate age at death within a range of several years. The woman's teeth showed significant wear, consistent with a diet containing abrasive bread made from stone-ground grain, typical of ancient Egypt across all social classes. All internal organs remained inside the body. The brain had not been removed through the nasal cavity. The heart, lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines were present and mummified in place. Traditional Egyptian mummification required organ removal. The heart was sometimes left in place, as it was considered the seat of intelligence and emotion necessary for judgment in the afterlife. But leaving all other organs violated standard practice. Yet the embalming materials were expensive. CT scans and chemical analysis identified frankincense and juniper resin. Frankincense was imported from the Horn of Africa or southern Arabia, a journey of over 1,000 miles. Juniper resin came from the eastern Mediterranean. Both materials were costly and associated with elite burials. The woman also wore a wig made from date palm fibers coated with frankincense, quartz crystals, and magnetite. Wigs were status symbols, indicating wealth or social position. The contradiction is immediate. High quality, imported embalming materials suggest a person of importance, someone whose family could afford expensive preservation. Retention of organs suggests a rushed, improper, or deliberately incomplete mummification, typically associated with lower-class burials or criminals. The two elements do not align, Sahar Salim, in the published study, noted. The mummification quality is poor, as all internal organs were not removed, yet the body was embalmed with costly materials. She concluded, the cause or true history of death remains unknown. The expression offers no clear answers. Post-mortem muscle relaxation can cause the jaw to drop open. If the embalmers did not secure the jaw with wrappings, the mouth would remain open through the preservation process. This is common and does not indicate suffering. But the degree of opening in CIT-8 is more pronounced than typical jaw displacement. The mouth is wide, and the facial musculature visible in CT scans suggests tension rather than relaxation, cadaveric spasm. The instant rigor mortis that can lock muscles at the moment of death requires extreme physical or psychological trauma. A heart attack can cause it. Violent suffocation can cause it. Sudden massive trauma can cause it. If the woman died in extreme distress, terror, pain, or asphyxiation, her muscles could have locked in that position. But cadaveric spasm is rare and difficult to distinguish from normal rigor mortis after millennia of mummification. Comparison with other screaming mummies offers limited insight. Prince Penaware's scream is attributed to strangulation while bound. His case involved documented punishment and deliberate defilement with sheepskin. CIT-8 has no sheepskin. Her wrappings are linen, normal and clean. The screaming mummies of Guanajuato, Mexico, are natural mummies whose expressions are confirmed to be post-mortem artifacts of desiccation, not evidence of live burial. Princess Maridaman, another ancient Egyptian mummy with an open mouth, was determined through CT analysis to have died of a heart attack. Her jaw dropped post-mortem. There is no scream quality to her expression. The mouth is simply ajar. CIT-8's expression is visually different. Though whether that difference is medically significant remains contested, the burial location beneath Senmet's family tomb might suggest a connection to the royal court. Senmet was a high official, possibly the lover of Queen Hatshepsut, though evidence for a romantic relationship is circumstantial. If the woman was associated with Senmet's household, her access to expensive embalming materials makes sense. But that association does not explain the incomplete mummification. Alternative explanations include embalming error, rapid death requiring immediate burial, or cultural practices not yet understood from that period. The 18th dynasty, during which Hatshepsut ruled, saw variations in mummification techniques. Not all practices were uniform. Regional differences existed. But none of the documented variations combine expensive materials with complete organ retention in this specific way. The mummy is not on public display. It remains in the Cairo Museum's storage facilities. Unlike Tutankhamun or other prominent royal mummies, it has not been exhibited in traveling shows or permanent galleries. The 2024 CT study generated media attention, but the museum has not announced plans for public display. Handling protocols require gloves and limited environmental exposure, standard for organic materials of this age. What medical analysis confirms? Expensive preservation materials. What it cannot confirm? Cause of death. The expression could be muscle relaxation. It could be cadaveric spasm. The incomplete mummification could be error. It could be punishment. It could be ritual variation. The museum acknowledges the contradictions in its published research. It does not resolve them. Someone invested in her preservation. Someone also left the work unfinished. Both actions are recorded in the same body, and neither is explained by the institutional documentation that catalogs her as a woman from the 18th dynasty whose history is unknown.